think we're live.
Oh, awesome. I think we are. All right. Sorry, everybody, just for a few minutes delay. We just had a few-minute technical delay, but we are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our roundtable. This is actually our third roundtable conversation. So this is our third one. We've had dating, relationships, then we did mental health, and tonight's conversation is the topic of finances. Now, I know some of you are possibly thinking, oh, finances, interesting, boring, but I just hang on before you tune out. I actually think tonight's going to be really practical and really helpful, because the reality is that we all deal with money in some way or another. Some of us have more money than others, but that's beside the point, because money is actually the #1 cause of stress in the Western world. And last week we talked about stress in relation to mental health, and we don't want stress. We want to minimize stress. And so I think it's a really important topic of conversation to have. And we're going to talk really practical tonight. We're going to talk about money and how that fits in with our faith, and how to be good stewards of our money. And we have two awesome guests with us tonight. Now, we also have Lucy. She's a regular. She's been on every roundtable discussion that we have had, but we also have two guests, and that is Alex Kruger and Wade Archer. And I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves. So Alex, would you like to go first? Would you be able to introduce yourself for us watching tonight?
Sure. So my name is Alex. I got married this year, so I am now Alex Kruger, but some of you will know me as Alex Radovan. Still a proud Radovan family member.
Yeah, I had to think twice in mentioning your name, because I was like, it's not Alex Radovan. Alex Kruger.
A good year. First year of marriage. My husband Gustav works away doing FIFO, so he's actually off at work tonight. I have a communications degree, which I actually got from Avondale, surprisingly, because that's not a degree that's well known at Avondale. But I went over there, had an awesome time. I now work in the mortgage broking industry. I've been in a few different roles, and now I'm in a space of looking after a technology department, and am surrounded by people in finance every day of the week.
So this conversation tonight is conversations that in this topic that you have every day in a professional capacity. So
yeah,
it's very
yeah, personal experience too. So, I'm still a youth, still young, still had lots of different experiences with finances too. So keen to chat tonight.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks, Alex. And Wade, we are very excited to have you on tonight. So Wade, introduce yourself. If people don't know you, and I think the majority of people would, but tell us about yourself. Tell us who you are, and a little bit about why we have you on tonight's conversation.
Hi everyone. My name is Wade Archer. I'm from the Cooler Cup Church. So for those who know me. For those who don't, I'm pretty loud, so I'd be surprised if you hadn't heard my voice booming somewhere from time to time. I'm an apprentice heavy diesel mechanic, so I'm not an expert when it comes to handling of finances. I don't claim to be. But I am very keen to be here tonight to share with you what I can share.
Awesome. Excellent. And we're excited to have you on, Wade. So, guys, just a little bit of a disclaimer before we dive right into our conversation. And that is that, yes, we're talking about finances, but we're doing so tonight from our personal experience. And if you need actual personal tailored advice for you, we want to encourage you just to find that professional advice from a registered financial advisor or mortgage broker. And we've actually got some names of some people that we can recommend to you. So in a moment, I am going to put up some resources that we are going to refer to over tonight's discussion. And in that list of resources is, some names of people that you can contact. So there's names and contact details that if you need some tailored professional advice, there's those names for you. So to delve into our conversation tonight, guys. So I am definitely an advocate for our education system. I have been a teacher in the past, so this is not coming from that perspective, but I know that when I stepped out of high school into the real world, that it was a little bit of a rude shock in some ways, particularly when it came to dealing with my money and budgeting and finances and tax returns and all that kind of stuff. So I want to ask you guys, what is something that you wish you knew or learnt at school? Because I did maths all the way through to year 12. But I have to say there were some practical things that I didn't know and had to learn the hard way. So what's one thing that you wish that you had learnt in school?
Well, I know for me, I wish that obviously most people go through a place of not having very much money, whether you go and do an apprenticeship on a first year wage, you don't have much money, or whether you go and study at uni, unless you're very fortunate to come from a wealthy background, chances are you'll be working part-time, not have very much money. So I think it would have been great to learn how to stay as debt-free as possible and how to budget really well to make ends meet. So when you do start earning more money, you can enjoy earning your more money a bit more and not be focused on paying off all the money you've already spent when you didn't have as much money.
Definitely. So the debt-free thing is a key for you, because I know obviously that some of those credit card deals and all of that kind of stuff can sound fairly appealing, particularly when you're young, but they can get you into debt fairly quickly and substantially. So I think, that's definitely some good advice there, Wade. Ladies, anything from you that you wish that you had learnt at school before you stepped into the real world?
Yeah, I think for me, it would be like when you go from a place of being in school where you're kind of relying on your maybe like a weekend job, or like relying maybe a little bit too heavily on your pocket money if you're lucky to get an arrangement like that. Just probably actually knowing what to do with my first paycheck, and like knowing that good habits, like even if you don't want to get all serious straight away, you can still make really good habits early on that will set you up for down the track. So I think it would have been the importance of trying to start some good habits straight after school when you're finally earning your own paychecks.
So not blowing that first paycheck.
Yeah, because look, let's face it, sometimes you finish school, you're like, oh, I can like let that weight off my shoulders. I just want to go and splurge a bit. But like book in that after school holiday or whatever. But it's probably a good idea to start some good habits as soon as possible.
Straight off.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think.
What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I think probably a little bit of a combo of both of what Wade and Lucy have said. But I think for me, when I was in school, I always had in my head that when you were saving for something. Like I was good at saving, but I was really good at spending once I'd saved. And so I ended up always kind of, especially going through that uni phase, like what Wade was talking about, I did some amazing travel experiences, even immediately. Like I worked during high school, and as soon as I finished high school, I went and did some traveling. So I was good at saving, but I was also good at spending. And I think I wish I'd learned probably at school some better techniques for saving and understanding different types of saving. That's probably the big thing for me. I wish I'd realized back then, that sometimes you just need savings because you need backup, not to spend on the next thing. Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether this was covered in school and I was just not listening, who knows, but I really wish that I knew about how to do a tax return, because I know I made some pretty big mistakes in terms of tax returns early on, and I probably actually still am in a bit of a learning phase many years on of things that I can claim and all that kind of stuff. And so I guess for me, that's like what I learned, but also a little bit of a mistake that I've learned from my mistake moving forward. So is there anything that you guys have had to learn the hard way? So something that you know now, but you learned from making a mistake from in the realm of finance?
I can go like straight on from that pretty much.
Yeah.
Where, you know, in the 2000s, a popular buzzword is the side hustle. And I have delved into that world and had some side hustles, and I at times surprised myself with how successful I could be in my side hustle when I wasn't expecting to be. And, you know, it's easy in your PAYG job, you know, your employer takes out your tax, takes out your super, you get your paycheck, you don't have anything to worry about. Yeah, you have to submit a tax return each year, but, you know, most of the time you're pretty excited when you get a tax return. But when you have a side hustle and you're earning extra money and you're responsible for it all, that is something where you do have to be really educated, and you have to have an accountant, and you have to know upfront how much money to put aside, what can you claim, what are business expenses. So that's, I did have one of my first side hustles. I did get myself into a pickle with a tax debt, where I was doing most of the right things, but I just wasn't quite educated enough on a couple of the finer points. So, you know, that's
learning the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the rest of you? Is there something that you've learned on the fly?
I think for me, I've learned quite often when you're dealing with something financial, especially going into some form of debt or taking on some form of contract which has to go for a certain period of time, we assume that our current living situation is just going to stay the same. And I think we can very easily not factor in for plans changing. And I've learned that the hard way, sort of, particularly when it comes to taking debt, go, oh yeah, nothing's going to change, so I'll easily pay it off within this amount of time. But you don't know, in that amount of time, anything could happen. You could injure yourself and have less money. You could end up needing to move and need money for that. Someone might come into your life, so your financial focus might suddenly focus on not only yourself anymore. So you need to take, what I've learned the hard way is sort of, I think, taking into consideration what could possibly happen in the future, as opposed to just assuming life will stay the same, particularly with debt or any contract type financial plans.
Yeah.
Commitments.
Ebbs and flows of life. Yeah. Lucy, do you have anything?
Look, I think I've had similar ones to what these guys have both mentioned for sure. I suppose one additional one is just that like financial literacy thing, you know, like, so when I stepped into my I suppose my first job after uni, just like not being aware of some of the words, and like being in a health profession working for the government too, there's all these funky words and there's a lot of perks that sort of come up, and then you sort of just don't understand what they mean, like things like salary sacrificing and all of this kind of stuff. And I think just maybe I was a little bit gung-ho in kind of going for those things and probably didn't stop to actually understand what was happening with my finances. Like, I think, Alex, like what I was hearing as you were talking was that idea of being conscious of what your finances are doing, and rather than being a bit on autopilot. So I probably was a bit not totally conscious of what my money was doing. I was just kind of going with the flow and hoping for the best a little bit. And so you kind of, I think, I've been blessed that nothing too terrible has happened, but probably I could have been in a better position if I'd looked a bit closer at the fine print and things like that.
Yeah.
I think we bring into like our finances a lot of habits that we inherit from our family, but also just kind of pick up along the way, and we end up with these ideas and thoughts about what we're supposed to do without sometimes really knowing. So I think like educating yourself, because like Amy said right at the beginning, you know, your finances are, I mean, money's what makes the world go round kind of thing. That's a popular saying, you know, like money actually really has a big impact on the way that we can live. And we take a lot of other things really seriously. And I think actually taking, you know, that education on your finances and what it means and what all those different things, as they come up, what do they mean, and what do you want to choose moving forward, and what do you want your money story to be in your life? You know, it doesn't have to be the same as your family. Like, I think that we inherit a lot of ideas and we don't always know where they come from. So I agree, Lucy. We've got a lot of learning and unlearning to do, I think.
Yes.
I like that, the unlearning as well. Yeah. Okay, so Alex, obviously you mentioned when you introduced yourself that you work in a finance field, in the mortgage broker sector. So coming from that perspective, what are some keys that you think might be really helpful for young people on how to handle their finances?
Yeah, I think that the big thing to think about, I think as we're growing up, you know, through high school, we often think about what we want to get. You know, we think we're aiming for an item, like we're aiming for a trip, or we're thinking, oh, we want a car, or we want that, you know,
for a purpose.
Designer dress. Yeah. And so we have these like moments that we're saving for. But I think as you become a young adult, I think moving into life, you actually want to think about, what do I want my life to look like? And what do I actually, how do I want to live? And how do I want my money to, you know, how am I going to spend my money? How am I going to make my money in a way that supports the philosophy of my life? You know, and from a Christian perspective, it's like, how does God fit in with that? In terms of, you know, we want to live lives that bring glory to him, and we want to be empowered, and we don't want to be stressed by money. And I think that it comes back to that education of what Lucy said before as well, of like actually going, you know, what do all these things mean, and what can I do to help myself, you know, to be a good steward and to get into a good position. And so I think actually thinking about what you want your life to look like. If you want to own a house, you know, and you're thinking, you know, I really want to buy a house in my 20s, then, you know, it's probably not a wise financial decision to rack up some credit card debt and, you know, get a really big car loan. You know, because that's actually going to impact your ability to purchase a house. You know, something that we talk about a lot in the mortgage broking industry is all these store cards and afterpays and zip pays that all these people have, and they have no idea, you know, that they still have their zip pay account open from a thing that they purchased, you know, 18 months ago. Or they don't realize that all these afterpay purchases have an impact. You know, just, you know, we're spending money we don't have, you know. So I think, you know, in terms of finances, I think there's kind of two things that we should think about, and that's like, what do we want our life to look like? What's our philosophy, our beliefs about money, and then also being educated so that we can make wise decisions. We have, you know, having experts that you can turn to for advice, making good decisions about your super and your tax and whether or not you want to buy a house, and you know, what sort of debt is good, you know, good debt, bad debt, that kind of thing. You know, I live in that world where, you know, we talk about money all the time. And it's fascinating to me that we have, everyone has such a different, you know, way of thinking about it.
Yeah. So probably out of that, the two things you kind of say, what is your long-term goals and vision for your life? And then two, like educating yourself in ways of like super and tax, all of those kind of things that are then going to help you reach those goals. Is that probably, yeah, awesome. Alex, there was something in there that you said about your belief about money. I'm going to throw a random one in here that's for you and for others. But when it comes to the belief of money, sometimes as Christians, we almost can have this belief that money is bad, that money is evil. What are your thoughts on that, all of you? Because I think that's really important at the get-go to kind of lay a foundation of the belief of money. And are there any thoughts surrounding that of money is evil?
I think that it's an interesting question that we should all ask ourselves, because I think that, you know, you have different experiences with money and everyone grows up really differently. If you grow up in a really rich family, or if you grow up in a really poor family, or you could grow up in a rich family and then lose all your money, or you could be on your own and have to make it on your own. And so I think people end up with very sort of laid down deep sort of beliefs about it. And I think as Christians, we sometimes think about it negatively. I happen to see money as a incredible gift. I have always given tithe. I have always seen money as a way to be generous. I've always seen it as a tool for impact. I believe it has a really practical place in all of our lives, and so it can be used for good or it can be used for evil, and it also can have really positive experience in your life, or it can be a really negative experience as well. If you're really stressed about money all the time and that's consuming your thoughts all the time, then you might not have a lot of space for other things, and you might be crowding God out a little bit. And so I think that's where sometimes the negativity comes.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I think I like what you said about it. It's a tool. So a tool can be used for good or it could be used for bad. I liked that. Do either of you, Wade or Lucy, have any other thoughts about the belief of money of inherently good or inherently bad, or, that kind of foundation to a belief system?
Well, I know for me, I don't chase money. I don't dream of being some millionaire or being particularly rich. It's not a huge thing to me. To some people it is. So different people have the different opinion. But whether the money is evil or good sort of thing, I would just ask yourself, when you get your money, do you ask yourself, how can I serve me with this money? Or do you ask yourself, how can I serve God with this money? And that's an interesting thought process to go down.
Yeah. It's going back to your priorities, I guess, isn't it? Yeah. Obviously, we've talked about how at the very beginning that money has a huge impact on our stress. It's one of the key things in our Western world that stresses us out. And on that note, it is also often a huge point of contention in relationships. It's actually one of the key areas that couples fight about. And it's often most counsellors who will do marriage counselling before marriage will definitely talk about this issue, because it is one that can cause issues in a marriage. And so on our discussion tonight, we have Lucy's married, Alex is newly married, she's a newlywed this year, and Alex and Wade is in a relationship. So, we are in relationships to varying degrees. What are your thoughts and maybe even some advice about how to handle relationships and money? Because they're two big things that can have contention. How do we deal with this in a positive way?
feel like you've been married the longest, Lucy. So you
Oh, look, I'll kick it off. I think it's funny, like in our relationships roundtable that we had a little while ago, I gave a shout out to Terry Johnson because he did our relationships premarital counseling, and I'm going to shout out to him again because like, to be honest, I think out of that sort of going into our premarital kind of phase and kind of preparing to get married, like this is one of the most useful conversations that I've had with Ryan in our entire relationship. And I think the interesting thing was that, again, you know, like when you sort of think, oh yeah, money, it's a thing that's in the bank. Like, I mean, who deals with cash now? Like it's something that it's not a tangible thing in our lives so much anymore. Like it's just a little bit like it's there. It's this imaginary thing in the background. But when we actually stop and think about what we use our money for, it's really interesting what comes out of that conversation. So like for me, what came out of that conversation was all of the different ways that we can place value on money. So some of the ones that come to mind are that money is about security. So, you know, money can be a way that we can pay for insurance. It can be a way that we can, you know, be okay in the unexpected. It can be about, you know, creating a base and a platform for life. So whether that includes buying a house and things like that. But money can be a lot more than that too. Money can also be about fun and experience. So it could be about travel and about, you know, like money can be a way of funding really cool experiences, like whether you enjoy going out for dinner at you know, you're a bit of a foodie or something, or you love to do the travel and adventure. Money can be a way that allows you to do those things. Or it can also be about being generous. So lots of people as well might know about, you know, the 5 love languages, and I'll kind of bring that in here just as a little touch point. But, you know, for some people, the way that they express love, you know, whether it's to friends, family, or in a relationship, is about buying gifts and about being generous and giving back to others. So money can actually allow you to do that too. So it's really interesting when you're in a relationship all of a sudden. And yeah, however you do your finances, it's a good one just to check in on and just say, hey, are our values about money actually on the same page, or are we at different, you know, ends of the spectrum? And either is okay. But again, it's about educating yourself about, you know, what are my values around money and what are the values that I'm bringing with me into this relationship? And let's just make sure that we're able to work with both and be compatible in that way.
Because I guess, like you say, with love languages, it is kind of a comparable thing, because often with love languages, you can be very different, but you can still work together. And I think you mentioned different ways of approaching money. You can, in a relationship, still, I guess, approach money differently. It's just, I guess, being on a point of respecting the other person and how they approach it. Would you agree with that, or like, is that kind of where you're going with that?
Absolutely. And I think probably like, so if I could throw out an example as well about, you know, in a relationships, all of a sudden, you know, if you kind of, you become vulnerable, and you also become vulnerable in your finances. And there are varying degrees of, you know, extreme in that. But, you know, one thing is about, hey, you know, you might decide to have a shared bank account. And so all of a sudden, your purchases are exposed to the other person in a way that may not have been, you may not have experienced before. So if you were to sort of take that in a different direction, at the extreme level, it might be a little bit of a touch point of micromanaging each other's spending and sort of, you know, really checking in all the time and saying, hey, you know, you went out for lunch today. I saw that, you know, you probably shouldn't have done that. We're trying to save. So it can be a point where, hey, you know, my financial spending is now exposed to the other person. I'm being vulnerable. And it can also be something where, you know, there might be a little bit of perhaps hiding money from someone. And, you know, we think about an important characteristic in a relationship is honesty. And so actually being honest and having honest conversations about your finances too. Yeah, it's important because all of a sudden it's not just you in the mix, and it's impacting another as well.
It's funny how, you know, dating, obviously, I mean, I've been single for a long time and used to managing my own money, and then dating, you know, you go out for dinner or you're, you know, out at the markets on a Sunday and you'll just be like, oh, I'll pay, and I'll pay or whatever. And you share and you kind of go, oh yeah, we're kind of doing life together. Like we're paying for each other for things. And then, you know, we got married and like opened joint bank accounts, and it was like this whole new world opened up. And suddenly I realized, you know, Gustav didn't just like coffee. I mean, he really loved coffee. You know? I could see that, how much he loved it in our bank account, you know. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Lucy, about like honesty. And I think sometimes like bearing your soul to another and being open about finances, it like opens another layer inside of you, because, you know, and I think Wade will talk about this more later as well, but just about tithe. Like I know that's had a bit of impact for you, Wade, but that like money is what we give. If we give tithe, that's like worship to God, you know. That is that's a really big thing, you know. And so if we're doing that with another person, like that's worship together. That's a really like intimate, it's an intimate worship.
I love that, Alex. That's really good.
And it's something that like my husband and I, like we have been, you know, when we get our paychecks in, we put our money into our tithe account, and when we do, we transfer it together, and then we pray about it. And like, it's just a new little like traditional routine for in our relationship. And so, yeah, it's like a next level. Like I thought that I was fairly open about my finances, and then I got married and I was like, wow, you have to be really open when you're married, you know.
Amy, you talked about resources at the beginning. Maybe I'll just drop a quick resource here when we're talking about finances and relationships. So not all resources are perfect, and I'm not necessarily recommending it. I'm just sharing my experience. But Ryan and I have found the Barefoot Investor really useful for us. And probably one of, like, there's a couple of things that I like about the method. And one of them is the fact that you set date nights aside to talk about finances. And that is really valuable because it's about making a shared decision, spending time and being intentional. I can't overestimate or like say that word enough, you know, about being intentional with finances. And that's one thing that we've been able to do through using that method. The other thing is, so a weakness that both Ryan and I have is that we were realizing that we actually at times like to burn a bit of cash just because, and guilt-free, like, have a little splurge. And actually by us setting aside money that we are not necessarily needing to be totally thoughtful about has actually helped us to be extra thoughtful in the majority of our money. So that's been a really useful thing for both of us, that we just have a tiny little sensible portion set aside where we can just satisfy that very human instinct of needing to do an impulse buy.
And guilt-free, like not having to feel guilty about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually been really useful and probably something that has reduced our tension related to finance. So have a look at it. It might be of interest to you, might learn something. And maybe even just the fact of establishing a date night to talk about finances might be a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that resource. Yeah, I've looked at that resource before, and there's definitely some awesome things and take homes from that. So I haven't actually put that one on the resource list, but I'm sure you can buy it in even Big W and Kmart and any of those shops. And I think it's only $20 or $30. Like, it's not a huge expense, but I'm sure if you Google it as well, the Barefoot Investor, some good take homes and pointers there. Now, Wade, I want to direct this question to you because I've been in the congregation of a church where you have done a sermon and you've preached about God and finances. You've brought, that tricky situation of tithe and finances that many pulpits don't have a lot of conversation about because it can sometimes people feel awkward about it. But you did so with some awesome personal experience. And yeah, it was a really inspiring message that I heard. And I actually would love you to share some of your experience in combining God and finances and allowing God to do his thing and to trust him with your money. So go for it, Wade, because I know that you have lots to share in this area.
Yes, it's been quite an incredible journey for me. But yeah, I believe strongly that learning is awesome and planning is awesome, and putting down plans, looking at resources, sort of having an idea of what you want to do in your life is awesome regarding all different levels. But what we can often do, and I've made this mistake before, is we can plan something down to every detail so well that, to quote Troy, we can effectively plan God
Troy,
out.
if you're listening.
And that's,
nice.
we think about that. You can do it like whether you're looking at a career option or you're looking at a relationship, or any big life decision, or even all the small decisions. I believe God must be the center of every decision, and finances are no exception to that. So for me, I've learned to accept sort of with my money, sort of if I want to go and buy something, to pray about it first. God, is this a good idea? Or is this not a good idea? And that goes in every financial decision making. And then tithers, to me, it's a big factor as well. We can look at tithe as 10% of our money that we don't get to spend, or we can look at it as one way we can love and serve God and remember who God is. And that goes hand in hand with having the attitude of gratitude as well. I believe if we praise God all the time, if we're thankful for everything he blesses us with, paying tithe can be an absolute joy. And handing basically all our finances over into the control of God, well, to me, it helps with the stress, because when I've prayed sincerely that God can look after my finances and what's going to happen, when things happen that I do not see coming, I can rest assured that God is in control. And paying tithe, to me, I don't advocate this. So you go, Alex, yes?
I was going to say, Wade, when you said that, like God is like sort of in control with that, I always think of God's name in the Bible, Jehovah Jireh, which means God provides. That's kind of just the name of God there for thinking about that provision.
Well, come to the God provides thing. I've been in a situation before where I've looked at my fortnight's allocation for the money. I've looked at that. Through not good handling of my finances, I've gotten myself to the point where I don't really have enough money to go around for all the things I want to do. And I got to the option, well, okay, if I don't pay my tithe for this fortnight, I can just scrape through. If I do pay my tithe, I'm in trouble. And I almost didn't pay my tithe. But I remember I felt convicted at the time to really ask myself, look, is Wade really in control here? Do I really have this sorted? Or is there a bigger picture? And should I just pay my tithe and give it to God? So that's what I did at the time. And I experienced at that time $100 was my 10% tithe. And in that fortnight, after being faithful to God with that, I experienced $100 of cash from 3 different people, making up that $100 being given to me. within that fortnight. And to me, that was just a remarkable example of just how much God does provide when we are faithful to him.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I don't want to make that the motive for paying tithe, because there'll be times when we do feel, hey, God, where are you? I'm in trouble here. But yeah, rest assured that God is always in control if we ask him to manage things for us.
I love that example. Yeah. God saying, yeah, you're being faithful and my faithfulness, which he promises through his word. Do any of you others have any other thoughts about tithe, maybe even a personal experience of how fitting God in the center of our money and our finances?
I think being intentional about it, it's a word that Lucy brought up before. I was raised with an amazing mother who was very good at teaching us why we do certain things. And I think that was because I grew up in a household where my father wasn't a practicing Christian. And so we were constantly going, why do we do this or why don't we do it? And I remember as a kid getting pocket money, and we would get $10 for the month. Way back when. Pretty sure I think my nephew gets $10 when he loses a tooth now, but still.
What? The tooth fairy was always a gold coin, surely.
So I used
Tooth fairy's got a lot of cash.
Soon it's going to be a Bitcoin or something.
But Mum used to give it to us as dollar coins, so that it was easy to take out the 10%, the $1, and we always talked about why we did that. And I think we sometimes talk about the practice of money, or like I've used the word philosophy, and I know Lucy's spoken before about like having date nights and intentionality, and I think that building in good routine and good habits is really important. And so when tithe becomes habit, it makes it a lot easier and it makes it a lot more enjoyable, I think. And I think when I pay tithe and I'm intentional, and I actually it's not an automatic transfer for me. I actually manually log into my phone and I transfer the exact amount, and I pray at that point, and I make it an intentional thing. And I think it's, Wade's so right. Like, it's not about, if I pay tithe, I'm going to do this for me. It's not about that. That's a really selfish way. I think it's actually all about being generous and free in that. And when you are open to that, blessing, you will find blessing. Blessing will come because you are in this space of giving. And so, it was hard for my husband and I this year. Like, he went many, many months without work, without any form of income. And we still gave tithe, even when it was really hard, because it was part of my habit and practice, And so God does bless because, in spite of it.
Can I jump in here and just quote Proverbs 3:5-3, where it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And that's something I can't stress enough, because not only on finances, with all aspects of my life, I've experienced my understanding where I think I'm so much in control here, and then that just being blown out of the water by something I never saw coming. So with our money and with our tithe, I remember a great example Mum gave to me when I was a very young boy. She said, if you pay your tithe, even if you think you can't afford it, you might just find that bananas are on special this week at the supermarket and you'll be okay. But trusting God with our finances and everything else, and even paying tithe, even if we think we can't afford to, realizing that our own understanding is basically rubbish when it comes to God's understanding, and really just putting our trust in God. I know I've a lot of experiences which have taught me the hard way to do just that.
I think giving tithe makes you realize that it's like the world is bigger than your little space. You know, like when you're thinking about, oh, can I afford this and that? And it's all about you. And when you give tithe, you're actually giving to this bigger picture, and you're giving beyond yourself. And I know, Lucy, you could probably speak to this a little bit, but being part of the church, you know, when we give tithe, we're giving a lot of blessing out there.
Yeah, that was the example that I was actually going to share. Like, so I have the joy of sitting in a lot of meetings every now and then to talk about church stuff, and I'm a part of the executive committee and the WA conference. And I suppose my story is actually the story of our conference for this past couple of months. You know, I think there has been incredible challenges this year, and we know from research and statistics that young people have been hit really hard. Maybe that's been work, maybe that's been not being able to travel for work, or struggling to finish uni and balance things like that. And we've been hit in our finances as well. And for young people these days, it actually is really hard to get ahead financially, to feel that you can get on top of things. But it has been incredible to witness tithe be steady and actually be up on last year from a WA conference perspective. And I know that Steve Goods, our president, and also our CFO, Peter Dose, who's just left the WA conference role, but both of those men have thanked members for their faithfulness again and again. And we've seen that in an incredible way this year. And so I think they wouldn't mind if I extended a thanks to the young people in our conference who have, despite a really, really tough year, remained faithful in their tithe. And something I can just speak to very briefly, and we're going to drop some resources as well specific to tithe in the Adventist Church, but know that your tithe actually does contribute directly to mission. It's not all about going into powering admin, powering office stuff, powering toilet paper and things like we often hear said when we announce tithes and offerings. Actually, tithe contributes to mission, and that is really what we're all about. And yeah, it's an extraordinary thing to see that on a large scale, people, even through really tough times, are remaining faithful in their finances and giving back to God. We've certainly got some challenges in our local church finances, and if anyone has any questions about where your money goes in church, I really encourage you to ask your local church pastor or your local church treasurer, or reach out to one of us, and we'd be really happy to talk to you about where your money goes, because I think that's important about, we're talking about honesty and transparency with money. And so I'd love to have that conversation with you if you're interested in that. But yeah, it's been extraordinary to see people's faithfulness and God's faithfulness always through it too. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the comment section where I've put the resources for tonight's conversation, there's some great resources that we've put up there that if you guys want to know more about tithe in general, there's one that's kind of like a bit of a Bible study that has what is tithe, and it goes through all the areas right from Genesis, when Abraham first tithes, all the way through the Bible. There's other, and there's another one that's just about money and generosity in general, and then a few other resources, and I think there's some videos in there as well that just can give you that extra understanding. If you're like, this sounds awesome, I want to be generous with my money, I want to have that aspect of stewarding my money for God better, but I need to know more, then there's some resources for you there. One of the last question that I want us to finish on this evening, because we are coming close to 8:30, which is the end of our conversation, but just going back to basics and looking at, okay, so how is us being faithful and generous with our money and God's faithfulness to us, how is this central to the gospel message? Because I believe that every single important part of our doctrinal understanding always is centered in Jesus and always centered back to the gospel message. So from your perspective, how does this illuminate Jesus, and how does this illuminate and is central to what we believe in the gospel?
Something that comes to mind, Amy, is there's a lot of parables that talk about money. And so from that perspective, going back to what you said earlier about, is money evil? Well, Jesus talks about money in some of his parables, and something that stands out to me in those, like the one that comes to mind, well, there's maybe two. One is, the lost coin, and then there's also the parable of the talents. Both of those kind of have elements about money, but I think the undertone in both of those is about value, and it's about a gift as well, and valuing a gift. I think Jesus does bless us with resources. Resources can be lots of different things, but one resource is money. And so really, I think Jesus doesn't call us to be dismissive of money or not to get involved in finances, but he does call us to value it, and to also value what can be done with it. And whether that is, being intentional about giving, or intentional about stewarding that money well, for what he's calling us to do. I think it's something that we shouldn't shy away from, and perhaps we have been. It's been one of those taboo subjects, and I think that actually through those parables we can learn a lot about maybe a different perspective on challenging how we feel about finances.
Yeah, definitely. And that parable of the talents, often we look at it purely in the form of giftings, like as in like spiritual gifts or talents and abilities that God has given us. And there's definitely that huge emphasis on that. But I think there's also the layer of money as well. And, it's whatever is in our hands that God has given us tools, like Alex said before. And some of those are personal gifts and abilities, but it can also be money for some of us, and using that and investing it like that parable talks about. And when we have it as the focus of the kingdom of God and investing in it, using it, then God, like the parable says, blesses that. It becomes tenfold and it multiplies when we have that focus of kingdom reality. So I think, you're 100% right. There's some beautiful parables that talk about the beauty and the value. So thanks, Lucy. Danny, do you have any other thoughts? Just closing off about God, finances, and the message of Jesus.
Well, I love when Jesus was here, he spent his lifetime in ministry basically helping people and serving people, as well as sort of preaching to the people on that. So when we look at our life, I think God calls some of us to sort of use a lot of money to help a lot of people, and then some people help people in other ways, and not so financially orientated. But as we look at our life and we look at our finances, remember that on this earth we can share God's love with people, love people, help people, and not be so focused on money that it gets in the way of that.
Money can be a way that brings us closer to God. It's part of being, it's just a part of our relationship with God, and so learning about that and the impact of that is really important.
think like a lot of things, it comes down to surrender, doesn't it? Surrendering our money, because it can have an impact that can prevent us from God, but it also is a point of surrender. And beautiful things happen when we come to that point of surrender. Do you guys mind if I just finish with a passage that Jesus is speaking, and it's in Matthew 6, because at the very beginning we spoke about how money is the biggest point of worry within our Western world. And I just wanted to just finish with this, if that's okay. And it comes from Matthew 6, and it's Jesus speaking, and it's in verses 25 onwards, and it says, "This is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food or drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? And look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns. They don't plant but your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you far more valuable to him than they are? And why worry about clothing? Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing, yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers," I love that imagery, "that are here today and gone tomorrow, he will certainly take care of you. So don't worry about these things." And verse 33 says, "So seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything that you need." And I love that. Going back to that basics of putting God above all else, and he will give us everything that we need. Money is a tool. It can be used for God's kingdom, but he's also just reminding us not to worry and not to stress, to be educated and to use it to make a difference, because I think money can be a beautiful thing that can definitely do that. As mentioned, we have put some resources in the comments section. I have said that there's some great people that you can contact that can definitely help you if you want to know some more things about how to use your finances wisely. Then there's some contact details there. I just wanted to bring your attention to one more, and that is the e-giving app. Because I know for me personally, I don't carry cash. I don't know about the rest of you guys. I'm really bad with cash.
What's cash?
And so when it comes to the offering basket coming around at church, it's often very awkward because Ben and I don't put the money in, and Scott often will get out his phone and be like, "I've got the app, I'm putting money in," because that is the reality of our lives today, at least a lot of our younger generation. And so I just wanted to direct your attention to that, because there is ways to give without having to have cash in your wallet. I'm pretty sure it is called the e-giving app, isn't it?
Yep, there is. Yeah.
I know you mentioned a lot, Alex, when yeah. So the e-giving app, you can download it on Android or iPhone. It's a great way, and there's lots of different areas that you can give tithe, but also many areas in church generosity. So I'd encourage you to download that, because that makes life a lot easier. So guys, I would like to finish our time with prayer, praying for you and praying for everyone watching, that money is something that we will be able to use for a tool, that's something that we aren't needing to worry about, and an object of surrender for our lives. So let's bow our heads and let's finish in prayer. Jesus, I just want to thank you so much for Lucy, for Alex, and for Wade, and for their generosity of time in giving tonight, in having this really important discussion. Money is, it's a part of our everyday lives. We all have it. We all need it to be able to live and survive. And it can be something that can be really stressful. But I just pray that tonight, that what has been discussed is practical, that there are tools that these guys listening can take and apply to their everyday lives, so that money instead of being something that's stressful, is something that can be used to serve their families, to serve their church, and to serve the wider world. Thank you for the stories and examples that these guys have shared, particularly one of your faithfulness. Thank you that you are faithful, that you want to look after us, that you are our Jehovah Jireh. And we just want to thank you for reminding us also in the passage of Matthew 6 that we don't need to worry, that you look after the birds, you look after the flowers, and you just really, really want to look after us too. So help us to feel that security and that safety with you. And I just pray that as we continue our evening, that you'll help us to continue to think about ways that we can be wise with our money and to steward it for your kingdom. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Amen. Thanks so much, guys. And I just want to say that if any of you guys would like to contact Alex or Wade or Lucy, you are more than welcome to do so on anything that they've talked about tonight that you'd like to know some more information about. They are more than happy to talk to you and to share anything that might be of extra value to you. So at that, we will end the conversation, but thank you so much for joining us. And I pray that your finances will be used for good. All right. See you guys.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye.
Bye.